Many thanks for staying with us on your first agricultural TV station in the nation, the Agricultural Research Council of Nigerian Television here in Abuja, Nigeria. My name is Joshua Ishaya. You can call me your farm guide. Today on the program Back to Farm, we'll be looking at cassava cultivation. Cassava cultivation is one of the most important root crop which is cultivated mostly in Nigeria as the largest producer of this crop. So this very documentary is aimed at giving you all you need to know about cultivating cassava. First of all, let's have our background report. Stay tuned. Cassava production in Nigeria occurs within the variety of cropping system, which on a given parcel of land could be in the form of monocrop or intercrop. In the monocrop system, cassava is the only crop in the plot. This is found mainly in large-scale commercial farms. And in the intercrop system, cassava is grown alongside other crops on the same plot at the same time. Crop rotation. This can take two forms. This involves continued use of the same parcel of land while alternating the crop grown from the one season to the next or from 1 year to the next. Crop rotation is in fallow. Fallow involves leaving a parcel of land unused for some time to enable soil fertility to build back before reuse. Some fallows are neutral. Land is left unsown as commonly practiced in West and Central Africa, especially Nigeria, while others are managed. Under the traditional cropping system, which involves growing a mixture of different crops and varieties of crops on the same plots of land at the same time, there is limited scope for the intensification of any one of the crops. Furthermore, the system is complex and difficult to analyze to come up with evidence and basic recommendations for improvements. More simple systems with just 2 or 3 crops are easy to analyze and therefore enable research results to be communicated and applied. Therefore, to achieve sustainable commercial production of cassava, the farmer should consider reducing the number of accompanying crops on the same plots. The crops grown together with cassava in Africa vary from region to region, country to country, and locality to locality due to differences in agroecological conditions and social-cultural practices. The common intercrop with cassava include cassava and maize, cassava and legume, cowpea, soybean, groundnut, pigeon pea, cassava and vegetables, chili pepper, fluted pumpkin, okra melon, and the likes. Most smallholder cassava farmers are struggling to increase their farm yields, maintain soil health, and achieve a more commercial orientation. On the other hand, a number of few factors acquiring cassava as their basic raw materials are being established. The current output level from the traditional smallholder cassava farming system is insufficient to meet the raw materials needs of the factories. To respond to these commercial opportunities, cassava farmers could adopt a basket of improved agronomic practices, which this documentary has tried to identify and describe. The topics range from land selection and preparation to variety of selections, planting time and density, weeds management and harvesting. This documentary focuses on cassava production. However, the enormous post-harvest economy of cassava is well recognized. Cassava farming could be a good option if the following biophysical, socio-economic, and cultural requirements can be met. Preferably annual rainfall of 100 mm or more, a minimum of 6 months of rain a year with at least 50 mm rainfall per month. The best soil for cassava are well drained and not extremely stony or shallow. Cassava is tolerant of high level aluminium and manganese in the soil, but does not thrive well in extremely sandy, salt-affected, clayey or waterlogged soils. Recommendations for waterlogged soils. If land is waterlogged, cassava can be grown by making soil mods or ridges sufficiently high to the tuberous roots are above the waterlogged soil. Cassava should be planted along with other crops such as yam, maize, and vegetables. It's planted at the top of the mold, cassava on the side or slope of the mold or ridge, maize halfway down the side of the mold, and vegetable around the base. Areas with severe imprata infestation are not ideal for cassava because the imprata rhizomes can penetrate the roots and cause rot. Recommendation for imprata infested soil: consider herbicide treatment before soil preparation to eliminate imprata. For example, glyphosate, a broad spectrum systemic herbicide, socioeconomic and cultural condition. Minimal skills are needed to select and cut planting sticks and to place these on the soil. However, care should be taken to avoid the spread of disease like cassava mosaic disease and cassava brown stick disease. Farmers in areas with infested needs to select clean planting materials and take care to avoid the use of coating implements contaminated by the disease. During the growing phase, cassava requires little or no pest and disease management, but could receive timely attention and weed control. In order to embark on commercial production of cassava, it is necessary to consider the following questions. Number 1. The market. Market. Is there a local accessible market or outgrower scheme? What does the market require? Can what the market require be supplied? Processing. Are the processing possibilities? How many alternative products can be made from the fresh cassava roots? And their access to supporting infrastructure? Is there a developed cassava value chain in the locality? Are there any policies that support the production, utilization, processing, and marketing of cassava or cassava-based product in the area? Are there any cultural perceptions that limit the potential economic uses of cassava in the locality? Does the locality have social stigma associated with cassava as a poor person crop? In land selection, ideally, fertile land on a flat terrain or gentle slope should be selected. Farmers often rely on their traditional knowledge and observation, such as presence of certain plant species or earthworm casts, as an indicator of fertile soils. Steep slopes should be avoided, as they could be erosion prone. If starting from a fallow, 3 to 5 year fallow is optimum. Land preparation. Land preparation depends on whether the land has previously been under cultivation, whether the land has been under a short natural or managed fallow, whether the land has been under a long fallow, natural or planted. For example, alley cropping. Whether the land is young forest growth, mature secondary forest, or virgin forest. Now, let's talk about the soil tillage. Tillage involves all forms of moving and turning the soil. Plowing to 15 to 30 centimeter depth. Digs harrow to a depth about 10 centimeter to produce friable topsoil region. In general, root crops, especially yam and cassava, are not amenable to zero tillage or other forms of conservation agriculture under a mechanized system. The best option is to carry out any single or combination of the above listed tillage operations in order to achieve weed removal, biomass incorporation, and good establishment of the cassava cuttings, easier weed control later in the seasons, easier harvesting, and higher yield. However, handmade mounds of ridges serve the same purpose in a smallholder non-mechanized system, which is more common. There are many improved varieties of cassava which are adapted to various agroecological zones and production purposes. Usually, farmers tend to know the varieties which are locally preferred and available. In commercial cassava production, market requirements are a major consideration in deciding the variety to plant. In both commercial and subsistence production, it is recommended that farmers should use disease-resistant varieties. Farmers should be advised to check with local extension advisors for information on the common prevalent disease in the locality and the varieties that are resistant to these diseases. When introducing new varieties, exposing farmers to demonstration plots and making them aware of the potential commercial utilization of cassava can be an effective approach for kindling interest in adoption of the varieties. Once the varieties, selection and planting of cassava cottage. Once the variety to be grown has been selected, the farmer should ensure that the plant from which the coating are taken are free from signs of disease such as cassava mosaic disease and anthraconoise. The implement used to cut plants are clean and have not been used to sick plants, and that the coatings themselves are freshly harvested. ideally taken from the bottom end of the stem and not with green bark or still bearing leaves. Clean cut not splittered and bark not chipped off. Implement and handle the cotton with care to avoid damage. Keep upright in the shade with the base partly buried in the soil to avoid drying. If there is need to store planting material for a longer time, long stems can be stored upright under a tree with the bases buried in moist soil. At planting, the top and bottom ends of the stem should be cut off and discarded. The rest of the stem should be cut to the right size for planting. Planting. Cotton can be planted on ridges, mounds, or if the soil is soft but not waterlogged, on the flat ground. Planting is done manually using a cutlass machete to make a hole. Then the coating should be inserted vertically or at an angle of about 45 degrees. Coating can also be pushed into the soil directly by hands. If planted on ridges or mounds, the base of the coating should be located near the center of the ridge or mound. This helps to increase the stability of the cassava stand and makes it more resistant to be moved by the wind. 2/3 of the coating should be below the soil with the remaining 1/3 above the ground. In general, cassava planting is carried out manually. There are currently no established mechanical planting operations for cassava that can insert the planting stick vertically or at a 45 degrees angle. As mechanical planters apply the stick horizontally in the soil, a technique that has been shown not to attain maximum yields. Spacing. The currently recommended spacing is a square arrangement, 1 meter to a meter, 1 cassava plant per square meter. This gives 10,000 plants per hectare. For varieties that grow upright without branching, to low and profusely branching variety, a higher density of 1 meter to 5 centimeter may be used. For multiplication of stems rather than production of roots, a closer spacing of 0.5 meter to 0.5 meter can be used. Now, let's look at spacing in cassava intercrops. The recommendation of optimal planting density in a cassava maize intercrop is 10,000 cassava plants. That is 1 meter spacing and 40,000 to 50,000 maize plants per hectare. Maize should be planted at 20 centimeter linear spacing with 1 plant per stand. Avoid cluster of several maize plants in the same stand. This arrangement is mostly likely to have little or detrimental effect on the cassava yields. The maize is sown in a single row between the cassava rows. Irrespective of the type of legume intercrop with cassava, the plant density of cassava should remain at 10,000 per hectare. The spacing for the legumes varies with the type of legume used as intercrop. For groundnuts, the recommended planting arrangement is to broadcast at 25% per square meter. For soybeans and cowpea, 2 rows can be planted between the rows of cassava, while the pigeon pea, which grow taller, a single row can be sown. Experienced farmers know how to position the accompanying crops relative to the position of the cassava. However, a minimum distance for those seeds in rows is recommended, so weeding can still be done along the row. For some legumes, it may be recommended to increase the distance between cassava rows. Reduce the distance within the cassava rows so to retain the 10,000 per hectare cassava density, yet provide longer space for the legumes. For example, cassava can be planted at a 1.5 meter distance between rows, yet 0.67 meter distance within the row, or 2 meter between rows and 0. within the rows. In all cases, cassava density is 10,000 per hectare, but operations for the intercrop legume are easier and may produce high yield because more spaces are located to them. After the legume harvest, widely spaced rows could be filled with additional cassava plants. If using ridges or mounds, as a general rule, erect growing intercrops are planted halfway down the side of the ridge or mound. More spreading intercrops, such as groundnut, should be planted first on top of the ridge or mound if the supporting crop of cassava should be planted between the ridges. The timing for planting of the accompanying crops depends on the crops involved. Generally, yams, legumes, and melons and maize are planted first before cassava. Now, let's look at some of the key checks Select the fertile land that is flat or a gentle slope. For land that was previously under cultivation, slash and still but use herbicide as present for short fallow. Now, let's look at replacements of failures. Under normal conditions, about 90% of all cassava cuttings planted sprout within 2 weeks of planting. Cuttings that do not sprout should be removed and disposed away from the cropping area in order to prevent the transmission of any disease that may have caused the failure of the cuttings. New healthy cuttings should be acquired and planted by the 3rd week after the initial planting in order to maintain the plant density. However, the new cuttings should not be planted in an exactly same hole from the failed cuttings were removed. To avoid the risk of repetition, however, the new cuttings should not be planted in an exactly same hole from which the failed cuttings were removed to avoid the risk of repetition of the original problem. Drought condition could cause a much higher failure rate. In such a situation, the farmer should wait until the rain resumes before replacing failures. If the higher failure rate is due to other factors, the extension worker should seek advice to the nearest agricultural research station or some other accessible experts. Now, let's look at weed control. Weed can retard the growth and reduce the performance of cassava. A well-weeded cassava farm can yield 30 to 40% more roots than a poorly weeded farm. Weed control forms a significant part of about 30% to 50% of the labor cost in cassava production. The exact weeding frequency will depend on the type and severity of the local weed problem, but in general, it is important to start weed control 3 to 4 weeks after planting. This can be done at the same time as the replacements of the failed cuttings. It is important to start weed control 3 to 4 weeks after planting. This can be done at the same time as the replacement of the failed cuttings in order to maximize the use of labor. Weeding should be repeated in weeks 8 and 12, while the final weeding could be done between 20 and 24 weeks after planting, depending on the rainfall. During dry phases, weeding may not be required, but it is always recommended to destroy weeds before dry phases and after the resumption of rains. Once the canopy of the cassava and of the intercrop has closed, the shading will effectively control most weed growth. The overall total number of weeding cycles depends, in part, on the resilience of the weeds, and this depends on agroecological conditions. Weed can be done manually, mechanically, or chemically. However, mechanical weeding beyond the first 2 weeks after planting can damage the roots. Therefore, manual or chemical weed control is preferred in this period. Farmers should use their local knowledge to decide which weeded material should be left on the plot or removed and discarded generally. Small broad-leaved weeds can be left on the field because they will die from the heat of the sun and become much bulky weeds. Weeds with rhizomes and weed species with the capacity to form roots from the stem pieces tend to sprout if caught and left on the soil surface, so the farmer should uproot and dispose of those types of weeds away from the field. Tall grasses should be uprooted and removed from the field before they flower in order to prevent seed formation and germination, which will further propagate the weed species. When cassava is intercropped with legumes, this limits the choice of herbicide that can be used. Expert assistance should be sought from local officials who can supply a list of suitable and legally permitted herbicides. In some parts of Nigeria, chemical weed control salves are offered by trained mobile operators if available. This might be a good option for farmers. Now, let's look at application of fertilizer use. By using chemical fertilizer on their cassava, smallholder farmers can increase their yield from about 10 to 16 tons fresh roots per hectare. The optimal use of fertilizer involves observing four basic principles. Applying nutrient to the soil enables the maintenance of soil health and improves depleted or poor soils. Nutrient depletion can occur after land has been under continuous cultivation for many years. For every 1 ton of cassava root harvested, about 2.3 kg of nitrogen, 0.4 kg of phosphorus, and 3.0 kg of potassium are removed from the soil. This means an average harvest of 10 tons of root removes 23 kg of 4 kg and 30 kg. If cassava stem cells are removed from the same plots for planting elsewhere, the nutrient export can easily double, triple, or quadruple because stems contain more nutrients than roots. The application of nutrients helps to replace the lost nutrients and maintain soil fertility to enable continued good yields in subsequent farming seasons. Standard compound fertilizer known as NPK supply nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. Most of the brands illustrate the combination of these three nutrients and ratio form, for example. However, NPK fertilizer are not ideal for cassava because they provide too much nitrogen, which causes cassava to produce too much foliage. Cassava does not require high amounts of phosphorus. Too little potassium, which the cassava requires for formation of fruit. Cassava requires a lot of more of this nutrient. Determining the exact quantity of fertilizer to apply on a given plot depends on the many factors and can vary from one soil to another. However, a simple way to determine the fertilizer requirement is linked to the cassava roots. Cassava use on cassava monocrop. Nutrients required about half of the weight of a mature cassava plant is made up of roots. Leaves and stems makes up the other half of the plant biomass. So if a farm produces 10 tons per hectare of fruits, can assume that entire crop production produce around 20 tons of biomass. The nutrient content in different plant parts are not the same. Leaves and small stems, for example, contain 10 times more nitrogen than roots, while other stems have about same nitrogen content as roots, but higher content. Many thanks for staying with us on your first agricultural TV station in the nation, the Agricultural Research Council of Nigerian Television. The program has been Back to Farm, where we extract cassava cropping system. I remain your host on the program Back to Farm, Joshua Ishaya, thanking you for being a part of the program. Bye for now.